In the last video, we looked at the basics of using selections, and we used the rectangular marquee tool and the elliptical marquee tool. Well, now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to zoom in, and I want to do something with the head of this baby and also the shirt of this baby. I'm going to come to my lasso tool. Now, instead of just clicking and dragging out with this, you draw out a shape like this, and the first thing you will notice when you're using your polygonal lasso tool, when you're using your freehand lasso tool, is that it's very difficult to do anything properly. There you go, there's my lovely shape. Let's zoom in on it a little bit. You can see it's all over the place. It's very, very difficult. Even when you're using one of these Wacom tablets which you draw with, or even a Cintiq where you actually draw on the actual screen, it's very difficult to make a clean selection like this. I think the lasso tool works best when you draw out rough areas. Right, Control plus D to deselect all that. If you want to just take an area here for working on further, it's fine for doing stuff like that, just working out broad areas. For more precise work, try using the polygonal lasso tool. Now with this, instead of just drawing out a shape, you click, 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 click out the points. The same way that you use a polygon on various different drawing programs. Now this might seem to be a little bit counterintuitive. Also maybe a little bit boring way to work. It's not. This will enable you to get a much more precise shape, because at each step, every time I click, I'm just double checking I'm in the right place, and you just draw out a shape like this, and you get much more accurate results without any of the headaches of using the lasso tool. The lasso tool has its place for making nice, quick, broad, irregular selections, but when it comes to selecting an area like this, I would go with the polygonal lasso tool every time. The good news is, if I come to my circular selection tool, and if I press Alt as before to minus an area, I can, and there you go. I can now make adjustments here. Press Control plus U just for a quick colour shift, and you can see things are getting adjusted within that area. Deep black shirt, way too black. Make it more saturated. Just shift the colours around. And what do you know, you've got a different coloured shirt. There. Press Control plus D. Alright, let's take a look at this. Let's zoom right in. Okay, now take a look at that edge we just created. See, it's very hard, very choppy. If I call it the image underneath, you can see there's no hard edge there. There's very rarely any hard edges. Even here, where it's supposed to be a straight line, you get a little bit of deep blue there and the light cream there, and you get 1 or 2 rows of pixels in between where either the digital camera or the scanner you've used to scan your photographs in has tried to work out that kind of halfway colour, and it says that, well, at that particular place, it was half dark blue and half cream, which is bluey grey colour. You'll see that all over the place, and you definitely see it down this here. Look, you've got about 1 or 2 rows of pixels there, which are kind of a mix of cream and red. You always get that in photographs all the time, and yet when we put down our selection, it was very hard. Don't really like that. It's not looking very realistic. It's not selling the shot. So I'm going to come back to my history. I'm going to come down to where I did the elliptical marquee. That's my selection there. So now I'm going to come up to where it says Select, the top menu, and I'm going to come down to Modify, Feather. Now remember last time, in the last video, we did 50 pixels. I only want 2 pixels. Now let's try that. Let's try Control plus U. Let's make it darker. Let's make it more saturated. Let's shift things around so we can really see the effect. Click on OK, and Control plus D to deselect. Yeah, I'm getting a more realistic transition there. So the moral of the story is, when you make your selections, and if you're working on photographs, always be careful to feather the selection. You don't want it too hard-edged. Okay, moving on. Let's take a look at this baby's head. I want to isolate this baby's head. Now, we've discussed the polygon lasso tool, we've discussed the freehand lasso tool. Now what's this one? The magnetic lasso tool. This is kind of a hybrid in between where you draw a shape out and where you get Photoshop to do the work for you by defining an area. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to click once, and now all I'm doing is I'm not clicking, I'm just moving my mouse along the area of the baby's head. And you see what Photoshop is doing? It's taking my input. I put a click down there just where the baby's ear is, because that's a sharp curve. And what Photoshop is doing, it's taking a look at where I'm going, and if it can find a border either between dark and light or two different colours, it's putting down control points. That is how Photoshop works. In fact, I think that's the only way any image editing program could work. When it comes to selecting things, it will try and find borders, contrasting areas, dark and light. Now an area like this, and it did a pretty good job there, where there's not much contrast between the cheek and the sofa, or the cloth they're sitting on. That could have presented a problem, but good, well done Photoshop, it did it. Now this, come back to there, and I've got my selection. Now I've zoomed in on the baby's chin, right here. The reason being is, remember what I was saying about how if there's not a strong border between two areas, Photoshop might get a little bit confused. Well, it has done around here. If you take a look, you can see it's got a little bit of the baby suit selected when all I wanted was the chin. That's not a problem. I can come back to my polygon lasso tool, and I can press Alt to take away from the selection, just a quick drag around here. This is one thing you'll find yourself doing a lot. Refining your mask, and double click, there we go, it's gone. And as before, I'm going to right click this time, come to feather radius 2 pixels, ready to go. In general, the more time you spend refining your selection areas, the better results you're going to get, and you can spend a long time doing it. I'm racing, it's a tutorial, but the more time you take, the better the end results. So now I've got my baby's head selected. Well, I could do what I did before and apply some kind of a filter or some kind of color adjustment, but there's different things you can do with it. If I come to my layers palette, come down here to where it says add layer mask, my selection is now added as a layer mask. I can edit it, I can do whatever I want with it. Okay, let's undo that. Other things I can do with it. If I come to Edit, Copy, and then I come to Edit, Paste, what it'll do, it'll create a new layer for me. See where it says Layer 1 there? With just that selection on there. That way I can make whatever adjustments I want to that layer. Okay, let's make some adjustments to it. Let's have a nice green baby. Little Martian baby. There you go, and if I decide I don't like that, why would I ever do that? I can always make it invisible. If I wanted to make the eyes, actually this illustrates a good point. If I wanted to make the eyes the original brown colour that they were, I can either use my eraser tool, and I can just rub out this layer to leave the layer underneath, which is a very difficult thing to do, as you can see. Very difficult to get a sharp edge there, so I'm going to Control Z to delete that. Or I can add a layer mask to this layer. And now, come back to my paintbrush, make it a little bit smaller, thank you very much. And I want to be painting with black. Now, let's zoom in a little bit. Come back to my paintbrush. I can use black to paint out the area. I can go over the area as much as I want. Then if I swap colour, so I go back to white, I can paint the layer mask back in. So now I can get sharp areas much, much easier than if I was trying to use the eraser. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, maybe you consider clicking on one of the links below and check out my game called Disco Baby, which is on the iTunes Store or Android stores like Google Play. It has 3 different games in it, a memory game, a maths game for children, and a dance along with me game for toddlers to join in with. Thanks for your time.